My next guest today is Dr. Jason Ottley. He is a Washington, D.C. native. Dr. Ottley personifies a perfect blend of scholarship, innovation, grit, professionalism, and heart. Having a strong reputation for student development, strategic planning, and empowering both educators and students to strive for the best version of themselves, Jason unapologetically is a natural-born leader who will prove to be essential in how the world views progressive education in the 21st century. He is the founder of the Bond Education Group and runs the American University Summer Institute on Education, Equity, and Justice. Welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Dana, thank you so much for having me on this beautiful, beautiful day in Washington, D.C. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well. So tell me a little bit about the story of you growing up and how you were raised in D.C. and then you guys moved out to the country. It was a very interesting story of
Yeah, and the more I think about it, and each time I tell the story, the more interesting it sounds even to me. I tell the story and I think to myself, wow, that's a crazy story. But yeah, grew up in Washington, D.C. In the 80s, early 90s. And DC, was tagged as the murder capital of the world during that time. I'm sure there's been several different cities since then that have been, unfortunately, tagged that. But at that time, crime was really high. DC, as people maybe know, in that time was affectionately called Chocolate City. And so you can imagine just the number of Black families that lived in one particular place, and then how just rich the culture was, how rich, tradition, and how rich family history, and how rich culture was. It was just, even food, Dana, like, really down south, Southern cuisine, Caribbean cuisine, African cuisine. Just an amazing place just to grow up during that time. But, the last couple of years that my family and I were there, crime got really, really bad. We had neighbors on both sides of us who were robbed, and we had our van stolen, bikes were stolen, a home was broken into. Luckily, nobody was home. My father was smart enough to have an alarm system. And so, all of those things had transpired, and my father thought, I got to get my family out of the city. I can't lose my boys to the streets, and I can't lose my boys to crime. And so we moved 74 miles west to a place called West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And the kid growing up in D.C., West Virginia, we didn't even know was a state. And so I'm telling my friends we're going to West Virginia. They're like, oh, you're going to Western Virginia, right? They thought Western Virginia was the area we were moving to, not an actual state called West Virginia. And so it was night and day. Moved to West Virginia, very country, very rural, lots of hills. Our first home was on a bunch of acres where there were cows and we could see chickens and people were riding horses. It was just wild. It was like the Twilight Zone, Dana.
Totally different environment, right?
Yes. Nothing that anyone could have said to have ever prepared us for that time. And as you probably can imagine, we experienced, a lot of racial angst and racial injustices. Mm-hmm. My brothers and I, in the first couple of weeks of school, being called names that were very inappropriate. My brothers and I getting into fistfights and, being suspended from school. And it was just a really hard time navigating that new world. It was a new world to me, and it was also a new world to all the rural white folks that we were meeting for the first time, because my brothers and I were the only Blacks in the school. So not only was it new for us, it was new for them. Mm-hmm. So over the years, that has been my excitement in helping cultures and identities and ethnicities and races really just understand one another. Mm-hmm. And so my drive towards education, I've received my bachelor's in English and my master's in special education, and then my PhD in educational leadership and policy. My drive to education has been, how do I get back to the place that birthed me? How do I get to communities that resembled the place in which I grew up, and provide opportunities for advancement, provide opportunities for knowledge, provide opportunities for growth, because those areas in which I grew up, there wasn't a lot of growth happening at the time. And
Mhm.
that there's a lack of growth because there's a lack of knowledge. And I was able to be blessed, and my brothers were able to be blessed to gain this knowledge. Had we not ever left DC, I don't know that I would have gained the knowledge that I have now. And so my excitement in creating the Bond Educational Group, which sits in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, is to provide knowledge, cultural capital to students of color who live in undeserved communities.
Mhm.
And so that's my whole, that's my passion. That's my life's work, is to make sure that students of color in undeserved communities have opportunities to use their gifts, because we're all gifted in something. But I think a lot of us never tap into our gifts because we never ever get enough knowledge in which to know how to use the gift. So our job at the Bond Educational Group is to help students tap into their gifts and be able to use it.
So when did you form the Bond Education Group?
It's new, Dana. We started having conversations about the Bond Educational Group at the end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
We were formulated and incorporated in January of 2020. And now we went from a team of maybe 4 or 5 having just brainstorming conversations about what this great empire could look like. And now we have a team of like 17 to include some student internships that we provide recent college graduates, and then also students who are still pursuing their first degree. So we've got a large team. We meet very often, despite COVID. We were meeting in person at one point, but now our team has grown so much, and now many of us are located in different states outside of the DMV. And we meet virtually every week. We have leadership meetings, we have team meetings. We're continuing to build programs and curriculum within our organization to prepare students and faculty for the fall semester. We know that the fall semester is going to look very different than the past, right? We'll probably have some sort of hybrid model. There are students, even over this past spring semester, who were taking classes online. And so how can we create infrastructure where we provide top-notch quality professional development to teachers and leadership programs to students, even virtually? So that's part of our job now as we continue to kind of build this thing out through the summer.
Mm-hmm. And so you talked a little bit about your passion and having formed the group. So who are the students that you're mainly working with? And are they mostly first generation college students? Are they mostly students of color? And what kind of led them to college, and what are some of the issues those students are dealing with on a regular basis?
Yeah, great question, Dana. Most of the students we work with now are students in K-12, in the K-12 pipeline, the high school students, and now we have created new opportunities for us to work with middle school students and elementary students as well. In our research, we've got a lot of great researchers on our team. We have found that, when you begin working with students of color for the first time in college, we have missed out on some great opportunities to have worked with them much earlier. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when they get in college, they are trying to navigate just the terrain of college, which for many students of color who come from homogenous backgrounds, lived in homogenous neighborhoods, whether they being all Black or all Latino, they're coming to many white schools and having to navigate a predominantly white institution. Mm-hmm. Not just that the campus is predominantly white, it's also that the campus structure and organization and policies and practices are predominantly white. Mm-hmm. Navigating so many new things for the very first time while trying to focus on your academics. So we do have some opportunities for student support groups on the college side, but a lot of our work, though, is with students who are in middle school and high school to prepare them for college, but also to prepare them for entrepreneurship. Because every student of color is not going to necessarily want to go to college right away, a 4-year some may choose a 2-year college, and some may choose trade school. But then there are others who may choose entrepreneurship. And so we also have a great team of individuals who have college degrees, but are also entrepreneurs. And so we do have an entrepreneur track as well. The second thing that we do focus primarily on, Dana, is working with teachers, primarily white teachers who teach students of color. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of our bread and butter. We have a race equity center where a lot of our professional development or special topics, and we have a race equity audit, excuse me, that we do. A lot of that focuses on white teachers and then even white administrators who lead schools who are very diverse. As far as student population, you may have 50, 60, 70% of students of color, but you have majority white staff of teachers and you have a majority white staff of administrators. And so helping those school districts work through culturally responsive teaching mm-hmm. and how to educate students of color where they are, as opposed to forcing students of color to be educated the way that you were.
Yes. So are you getting a lot of calls and a lot of requests for professional development from different districts now in the past few weeks?
Oh yeah, it to the point, Dana. We're like trying to grow because so many calls have come in and so many requests have been submitted that we need to create a larger team. We knew this would come at some point, but I think it came much sooner than all of us thought it would. We figured, okay, we'll have a few contracts a year, and we'll continue to build this. But we're getting so many requests now from different school districts. And a lot of the requests have really come like consultation requests. Hey, a superintendent of public schools wants to call my team and kind of do a Zoom call for an hour. And can we talk through some of the challenges they're facing in their school district? So we've done a lot of that, but we're also working with school districts that want to put together a more robust plan. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's interesting about the Bond Educational Group is we typically don't take on work where they want us to come and just do one professional development or maybe even a series of or 2 or 3 professional developments. We create our work to be 3 to 5 year plans. Like mm-hmm. if you're not looking to sign on for 3 to 5 years with our organization, then we just don't want to be a part of that work because we know it takes that long. It takes an entire year in some instances to become more racially conscious, more racially aware. And then if we're working with teachers, well, then how do they translate the consciousness into the lesson plans? Well, that will happen in year 2. There's got to be some level of modeling. So not to go into all of the things that we're rolling out between years 3, 4, and 5, but we just recognize that in order for schools to really see change, change won't come through 1 or 2 professional development trainings. Change will come when you have created a rubric, a framework, a blueprint, policies that point to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes, and I think that's definitely something to point out for those districts who are looking for PD and to understand how to have more equitable conversations in a teaching practice and to have more culturally relevant education. Yes, it's something that needs to change over time. I know a lot of teachers, are talking now about what they can use in the classroom, curriculum materials that they can use in the classroom, and that's become a big conversation. But having, those superintendents and district leaders reach out to you and get a little bit of consultation and tips from your group, I think is something that's very timely. Could you talk to me a little bit about your own experience going back to when you were taking your PhD? You said, so what you're doing with the Bond Education Group, you're helping a lot of these Black and brown students navigate in institutions that are predominantly white. So mm-hmm. you told me a little bit that when you studied in Atlanta, that was at a predominantly white institution. And did you encounter biases there, and how did you navigate those?
Well, yeah, actually, all of my education, Dana, was from predominantly white institutions. And so you're right, there were microaggressions that I experienced in an undergraduate, my undergraduate years, microaggressions in my master's program, and then microaggressions even in my PhD program. But
Mhm.
it was the community of other Black and brown students who were experiencing the same things that I was, that allowed me to really get through. Um, it's impossible. Let me not say impossible. Let's just say next to impossible for an individual of color to go through a predominantly white institution and to do well and not have found community.
Mhm.
Research shows that many students who don't find community in their first semester, let alone their first year, typically drop out of college. And so I was fortunate enough to find community in my first semester. And then after my first year, found community from other Black and brown leaders on campus who took me under their wing and helped me to find myself, helped me to locate my own talents, helped me to develop a plan of advancement, helped me to develop what my life looked like beyond college. And I met individuals like that then at every level, from undergrad to my master's program to my PhD. And had I not met individuals specifically of color, it would have been tough for me to navigate. But I will also say, I also met great white colleagues
Mhm.
were invested in my work and in my success. So for me, it took both. It took the village or people of color who worked in leadership positions to encourage me when I felt like maybe I want to give up. But it also took white professors who were invested in my success to sit down with me and to help me through the curriculum and help me through the research and help me through the writing. So I was getting everything I needed from the entire community. The Black and brown community was providing me with the emotional support that I needed, but the white community was providing me with the cultural capital and the resources that I needed in order to advance.
Mhm.
That's why I became so successful in all of my schooling.
I think, like you said, it takes a village, and even at the graduate level, right? You need those support structures in place. And it sounds like you're taking what you experienced during your college career and now helping those other students. And as you said, that goes back to K-12 and having those kids kind of find out where they can study and help them come to college. So let's say you're working with kids that are at middle school age, you're working in a school with the bond education group. How do you present to that level of students when it comes to them thinking about their future and opportunities for them post-secondary?
Yeah, great question, Dana. A lot of times students in middle school and elementary school, when you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, many times students of color will share things that they have seen in their own community.
Mm-hmm.
Young boys may say, hey, I want to be a basketball or football player, right? Young girls may say, hey, I want to be an actress or I want to be a singer.
Mm-hmm.
And they oftentimes see that in the media because the media portrays Black and brown success in sports and in music and film. But we don't always see the other great professions that Black and brown folks hold. And so I think for middle school and elementary school, it's exposure. So the bond educational group will come in because we are a team that is lots of minorities on our team. And we all have had great success, and we'll begin to expose students and even their teachers to different careers outside of the ones that they think that they want to go after, right? You ask a white student, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be, own my own business, right? Or I want to work on Wall Street, or I want to be president of the United States. Why? Because they've seen the white community hold all of those positions, right? And so for us, it's exposure, helping students to be exposed to the success of the Black and brown community outside of just what the media portrays.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great coming into those younger levels with students and showing them what's possible, right? They're all scholars and they all can achieve great things, and planting that into their heads. I used to do that when I taught high school. Just they had a mantra every morning. You know, we are scholars. I don't remember the words, but it started out with something. We are scholars. We can achieve everything. And they would repeat that every morning. So we talked a little bit at the pre-chat about maybe a former student that you've worked with that you saw come out of the trenches. Do you have a story that you can share about an experience of a student that you've worked with?
Yeah, come out of the trenches. Oh, absolutely, tons. Oh my goodness. One that just comes to mind is a student of mine who, grew up in New York,
Mm-hmm.
came to DC to go to college, and then when he talked about just what life was like growing up in New York, and sharing a bedroom with multiple siblings, and oftentimes having to wear some of the same clothes to school in the same week, having to work a job after school to help provide money for his mom to take care of some of the bills in the house,
Mm-hmm.
and to be accepted into one of the most prestigious schools in Washington D.C., and to do very, very well academically, in spite of these challenges, in spite of knowing that home life is still not what he'd hoped it to be, working while in college, sending money home, staying on top of his grades. You look at a student like that and you wonder, wow, I wish the student had an opportunity to enjoy their college experience. Because when we think about college, we think about, getting a chance to grow our networks and find friends and find folks that we have, commonalities with, and travel and maybe study abroad, right? We think about all those wonderful things that we could do in college. And then many of us don't think about some of the challenges that students of color face when they enter college. They come into college with a lot of baggage,
Mm-hmm.
and the institution is not helping them to unpack that baggage. And so who ends up helping them to unpack the baggage, or helping them work through the baggage, or helping them to provide, for themselves so that they can go back home and help their families even more, right? It really takes a relationship with faculty, a relationship with staff on campus, mentoring. And so I've been in all of those spaces for many students of color, because they bring in such great challenges and they carry such great baggage when they arrive on campus. And that's one of the things that institutions don't really do well in thinking through.
Mm-hmm.
They just make the assumption you have the grades to get in here, which means that you should do well, not even thinking about how transitioning to college may be, and how you overcome the challenges that you faced on campus, but also challenges you face in the home. So that student that comes to mind, because he overcame so many challenges and moments where he could have just dropped out and gone back home and just got a job and helped to take care of family. He was able to see the bigger picture, and not because he knew the bigger picture when he arrived on campus, but because he found community, and he found a good number of mentors on campus who helped him to see the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you know where that student is now?
Oh, back in New York, thriving.
Yeah. So, those
Wonderful.
success stories, working with those mentors and finding out what those what those students can become capable, I think is always great to have. Thinking about what have you contributed to those students' lives, right?
Yes. Yes.
So if there's one thing in particular you'd like listeners to remember from today's conversation, what would it be?
The listeners who may be asking the question how to get involved. I've had that question asked, to me these last few weeks, certainly with all of the things that have happened. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, those are just three names, three names, but these types of injustices have been happening for some time now. And so I think that I have had more people reach out to ask, how can they get involved? One of the things they now say is to get involved with an organization, a nonprofit Mine is the Bond Educational Group, but other nonprofits or other organizations that are doing this great work.
Mhm.
One thing to be able to pledge money, to give money, money is great, but how do you help beyond the money? And I believe it's your time.
Mhm.
There is a network that you have. There is experience that you have. There are gifts that in skills you have. Bring those to an organization that is doing this work so that we can help make the quality of life better for all people. And so I just challenge anyone who is listening and you want to get involved, find an organization and devote time to that organization. We love money and we love the ability to invest in the community monetarily, but it's something even more powerful about having you in the trenches with us as we do this work.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a powerful point to end with. Having those volunteers, those people who like to contribute in the trenches, and seeing how they can contribute to making everything more just as we have this movement in the U.S. right now, and hopefully this will lead to great change in the next coming year. If
Mm-hmm.
if listeners would like to follow you on social media or find your website, where can they go?
Yes, those who are listening, you can find me. I'm feel like I live on LinkedIn just because so much. I mean, that's how we met, right? So much
Mm-hmm.
happens, on LinkedIn. You can find me just under Dr. Jason Ottley, but also Facebook and Instagram. Both are Dr. Jason Ottley. My last name is spelled Ottley. And so I'm in all of those spaces. I'm doing a web series right now. And we've been doing it for the last couple of weeks. It's just an amazing web series about where do we go from here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we know where we are, but where do we go from here? And
Yeah.
that series brings on great voices and great minds from the community, and not just the Black and Brown community, but from the larger community. We have white professors, and we have white law enforcement and white attorneys also joining in with Black professors and Latin attorneys. And, it's just an entire village discussing where we go from here, how we pick up the pieces, how we develop a plan moving forward. What should we be doing when it comes to voting, and what are our constitutional rights? And we just have great discussion. That call meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So those who are interested in listening to one of those calls on Zoom, they're live calls. You can just follow me on Dr. Jason Ottley, LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and I'm always posting every week who's on the new flyer and
Mm-hmm.
what the topic will be.
Okay, that sounds like a great thing. I'll put that in the show notes. It's a great thing to follow with these relevant conversations and hearing those voices. I've seen a few of them online already. So yeah, I definitely will tune into that. And I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast and sharing your story and just what you're doing today to work with those individuals and those college students through your organization.
Yes, absolutely, Dan. And I just appreciate you just having the space to be able to talk about it. I just feel that those who are in this work, we just do. And sometimes we don't pause long enough to even reflect on the things we're doing. So thank you for allowing me to do that this afternoon. Just even how I got here and where I'm going. I think that's a great conversation to have.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks.